So Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master is a book that includes 8 steps for game preparation. It is a book based on feedback I've received from literally thousands of game masters, discussions with hundreds of game masters on some of the best principles for helping people prep their game. And I refined it down to 8 steps for game prep. If you want to see me use these 8 steps for doing actual game preparation, I have a whole separate YouTube channel, or not a channel, but a whole separate YouTube playlist where I've been using the 8 steps, not just for D&D, but also for Shadow Dark, Numenera, Blades in the Dark, other systems that I've run where I've used the 8 steps for game prep. But one of the steps I wanted to talk to today is the outline important NPCs step. So in this idea, one of the main steps from Return is that you are sort of doing your individual prep of the different components separately so that you can drop in the components you need. Building NPCs is a very common topic. It's something that every Game Master's Guide discusses. GMs talk about NPC generation all of the time. And I wanted to offer a different approach for this, what I refer to as like a lazy approach for how to build NPCs. One of the considerations for NPCs, and I've talked to many GMs about this, is about half of the NPCs that show up in a game are improvised anyway. That when you're running a game, you generally have some NPCs that you bring forward, but it's highly unlikely that you're going to have all of the NPCs that you need for a given game. Sometimes the game goes in different directions, and a lot of times you're generating NPCs on the fly. So the thing you need to generate NPCs on the fly is most often a name. But what about everything else? Well, a lot of times people are generating NPCs from a whole list of criteria. What's their appearance like? What's their behavior like? What's their mannerisms like? What are their backgrounds like? What are their motivations? All of these different sort of things. And many different guides, including the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide, have tables that you can roll on for things like appearance and background and motivation and mannerisms and attitudes and all of these other things. And if you had to generate all of that, it can take a lot of time. It can take you a while to kind of either roll on it or think about it or walk through it. So I offer a shortcut in Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master where I say, instead of bothering to come up with all of these traits, instead find an existing character in popular fiction, grab that character and use all of those mannerisms and traits and backgrounds and motivations and goals and everything from that character and just reskin it in the same way that we reskin a monster. Reskinning is a super powerful technique. It might be the most powerful technique for lazy GMing, is the idea of taking all of the work somebody had done to build something else and using it and just changing, filing off the serial numbers and just describing it differently. You can do it with campaign worlds. It's most often done with monsters, but you can do it with magic items. You can do it with characters. You can do it with entire campaign worlds where you just sort of take this base world and just shift it differently. And now you have an entirely new place and you get to capitalize off all of the work that happened from the other one. The same is true with NPCs. If I take a character like Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark, I now know who he is. I know what he sounds like. I know what his motivations are. I know how smart or how dumb he is. I know what he's doing. I can pick up mannerisms from him. And then I can just do something. And one thing you can do is a really dirty trick that I use is switch the genders. So what if you have a villain in your game who's a woman, but is like Belloc, right? And has all the same motivations as Belloc. Well, now all of your mannerisms, appearances, traits, backgrounds, goals, all of those things are baked into the character. So that's something that I talk about a lot in here. And it is it's a really good shortcut for building an NPC. I use it often. I'll be honest, a lot of times I don't even need an archetype. A lot of times all I need is a name, and sometimes I just let myself go free and build the NPC on the fly in my head. And I think GMs do that a lot of time when we improvise NPCs. So sometimes I will hear GMs who say, I need to do more prep than what you're describing here for an NPC. And my answer would be, well, what happens when you need to improvise one at the table? What do you do then? And a lot of times well, I scramble, right? And I scramble and I come up with something. But they probably don't roll on a bunch of tables. They probably just make one up and go. My argument is you can pretty much do that for all of the NPCs that you've got. But if you really want to have a lot of details, the character archetype works. So a new trick that I've been using is picking the archetype and choosing a selection of archetypes from one particular show or one particular movie or one particular source of fiction. The advantage of this is if you pick just one show and say, I'm just going to pick characters from that show. You now have a list in your head of those characters, and they're ready to go for you to improvise. So one that I've been using recently, I've been rewatching The Expanse. Excellent science fiction series. Is one of my favorite science fiction television shows, was The Expanse. And boy, the characters in The Expanse are excellent. There's so many good characters in The Expanse. So what I can do is just say, you know what, for my game, I'm just going to pick characters from The Expanse. That way I've immediately down selected my list of candidates for characters that I want to bring in. So if I want to have an archetype for the main head of the Golden Knights of the City of Arches, I can say, you know what? Fred Johnson actually works really well. Fred Johnson from The Expanse. So I'm going to use him as my character archetype. So a lot of times I can just grab the list of characters from Wikipedia, and that list can work really well for me. So if I have, Fred Johnson as one of my characters, if I decide, Amos would be a really fun character for an NPC that the characters run into. Naomi is an excellent character. I can pick all of these, that they work really well as archetypes. And immediately I have appearances. Immediately I have motivations and mannerisms and their approach to the world and gestures that they make and just ways that they stand work really well. So whenever you are trying to think about what characters would work well for your NPCs or what archetypes you want, just pick a favorite show of yours. I have a whole bunch of different ones. Rome, I really like. The Wire is really good. Expanse, Sons of Anarchy. You can pick a whole bunch of different shows and go, what could those characters be? Now I've got a list of characters that I can use, that I can grab. That's finite. That is only like 12 or 14 different characters that I can bring into my game. I don't have everybody. It could be harder for me to think about the perfect archetype. No, don't think about the perfect archetype from all fiction. Just pick it from one particular show that you are familiar with, and it can work really well. I find that TV shows probably work better than movies because there are usually more characters in a TV show than there are in a movie. There's a lot of characters and a lot of sub-characters in The Expanse than there would be in like 2001, if I was going to pick 2001 as an example. So that is one trick for applying character archetypes from popular fiction to the NPCs that you have in your game. Again, a really good shorthand for generating all of the typical things that you have to generate when you're building an NPC, only you're able to grab it from just a single character that's already been well developed in a TV series, where I guarantee you they spent more time thinking about that particular character and how they operate than you will for the one NPC you're trying to drop into your game.